Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running and nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are ready for a great show today because we have the one, the only Marcel Gagne joining us as we talk all things Linux with cooking with Linux. And of course, this is a segment dedicated, if you are new, then everything about, Linux, different distributions and different problems and solutions. Today, we have a few of those that you can solve with Linux. And, it's just a very versatile operating system and definitely worth highlighting. And, I can think of no one better to do that with than the one, the only Marcel Gagne. So with that being said, actually a couple of things before we get started, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes. And Marcel does a great job of compiling the show notes into an easy read document. So if you want to check out, anything that we talk about here today, you can find a link to that at computeramerica.com right there on the homepage. All right, so there's that. Check out the live video portion, which is also at computeramerica.com, brought to you by OWC. And also be sure to check out the social media contest, which is, of course, brought to you by Logitech. All right, and of course, there's tons more at Computer America, including reviews and articles and, just everything that we do. You can find right there. All right, so with that being said, why don't we go ahead and get things started with our guest. And again, he is, he runs Cooking with Linux. He's been doing it for a long time and is just all around very well versed in computers. So Marcel, how you doing? Welcome onto Computer America.
Hi, thanks for the kind welcome and the fancy Dan introduction there. I do appreciate it. Of course, you know that I was trying to see if I could get you to lose it over there by drinking from the bottle and things like that, right?
Luckily, I had you on like the 18th monitor, so I was like, I see you swigging from the bottle, and I'm like, you know what? We're gonna focus. We're gonna focus. But
just ignore him. Just ignore him. He's trying.
We got this. So straight face accomplished. But let's go ahead and actually, before we get kind of completely started, give us your introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself. Who is the real Marcel Gagne?
Oh, good grief. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. And I've been at it for quite a while. But in the introduction, you said Cooking with Linux. I tend to call my show Cooking with Linux. And that originates from way back when, in the day when I did a column in Linux Journal. It was a monthly column that I did for 10 years in the Linux Journal. Which was strangely, insanely popular with about 95% of the population and about 1% which absolutely hated it with a passion. But basically, I pretended to be a French chef in a really cool restaurant, and I served up Linux and cool open source software, and I sort of carry on that idea to this very day. Yes, I do love my wine, and I do love my open source software, and I do love Linux, and I'm still telling the story all these years later. So that's kind of who I am. I'm a, or as I like to call it, writer and free thinker at large, among other things.
There you go. Yeah, and of course you can find a lot of what Marcel does even beyond Linux with that handle. So with so with that being said, before we get into politics, religion, anything like that, which is always fun, but unfortunately, when you go down that road in a tech show, you stop being a tech show and you start to be an argumentative show. So Instead, we're just going to go ahead and kind of get started. And of course, regulars, longtime viewers of the show know that Marcel always comes on, and he has, most of the time, a nice red wine. Sometimes he has white, sometimes he has eggnog, sometimes he has bourbon.
Wait a minute, I've never had bourbon on the show.
You had You had something that was a different kind of liquor, but it was not wine.
You're right. I did have a rye whiskey once on the show.
That's what it was. It was a whiskey. That's right. But today you have red wine. And you seem to be heavily enjoying it.
Today's wine is a Chilean red. It's called Gato Negro. There we go. I'm going to hold it up to the camera there.
Mm-hmm.
Gato Negro. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's your basic. It's not. I tend to like my cabs full bodied, and this one is not. This one is more what I'd call a medium bodied, but it is a nice deep dark red. It's very jammy.
Jammy.
Yeah, it's very jammy. Moderate tannins. It's very dry. It is very dry. I mean, it's the kind of you feel that immediately on your tongue, but it's also a very inexpensive wine and a very good one for the price. I think this sells for like about $8 at the LCBO or less, quite possibly. So this is actually like a bargain wine that is actually a really good drinking wine as well. So highly recommended. Gato Negro, San Pedro Cabernet Sauvignon. This one's a 2017, and cheers.
Yeah, cheers. And hey, it seems like a lot of times that the one that you choose, you're like, I've had, there's better out there, but it's not bad. And it's like, oh, it's $11. Oh, well, how much can you really complain about, something that tastes good? Not great, but good.
Wine. I'm not a wine snob per se. I do like a good wine, but
you'd think coming from a French restaurant persona. Yeah, but you think coming from like a French restaurant persona, you would be the quintessential snob. You'd think.
Well, okay. Every once in a while, I may feel a little snobby, but to be perfectly honest, on most days, I'm perfectly happy to drink a good. I won't drink crap. I will not drink a bad wine. But I don't feel that I need to spend a humongous amount of money on a day-to-day basis on a wine. And right now, Ben, you've got a bunch of people, if they're listening for the first time, going, these guys are talking wine. What the heck is going on here?
Well, no, because I think, honestly, that the past couple of sentences that you used, it could just be a perfect analogy for how you feel about Linux. Because, you may prefer some of the better ones, but you have no problem going and finding the lesser used distributions out there, or, trying new things. And that's great. That's why we like you.
That is very true. Actually, one of the things that you guys did when you started Computer America, when Craig started Computer America back a million years ago, back in the days when dinosaurs still roamed the earth.
A fun fact: Computer America is only 1 month older, or 1 month younger than I am. Craig started in February 1991. I know, right? So, fun fact. But yeah, long time ago. Go ahead.
Anyway, one of the things that was really true back then, and I think it's still true for a lot of people today, is that computers were like, now computers are like magic. We've entered into the world of magic. I don't know about you, but I've got a Google Home here, I'm within sight here. I've got a couple more in different rooms of the house, and maybe you've got an Alexa. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But the point is, it's kind of magic. You just sort of expect things to be available for you and to work, despite all the problems that we had trying to get Skype working for us a little bit earlier on here. Right. Skype. Anyway, but we were hobbyists. We were experimenting with this stuff. It was new. It was different. And we weren't afraid to get our hands dirty. And there's still some of us out there. And I'm not talking about in terms of age. I'm talking about there are still people who like to play with computers, and they like to play with them not just as these tools that they watch videos on or whatever, but they try things. They experiment. They load up new software. They see what it does. They tweak it. They try to make it work in ways that maybe aren't standard. Sometimes you call these people hackers, and by hackers in this case, I'm not talking about breaking into your system and doing evil and terrible things. I'm talking about people who just like to play with computers and see just what they can make them do. We've got makers today who use things like Raspberry Pis, to create all sorts of, or Arduino chips, to create all sorts of funky and fascinating things. And, I think that that's the spirit of personal computer hacking, just, and of course, the spirit of, the original spirit of this show, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, Craig really made it a point back then to show just what computers could do, because, in 1991, computers really weren't a known entity. If you were an office worker, maybe you had to use a couple different things, and it was more of a pain in the neck. But he really tried to highlight the fact that every person is going to use one of these, and they're going to use them for all kinds of projects. So I think he was absolutely right. And 27 years later, couldn't be more right. And especially to your point, the whole maker culture behind Raspberry Pi, Arduino, only getting more accessible. But you're right. I mean, a lot of the other distributions that aren't Linux, they tend to mystify things, hide things behind the curtain. It just works, but that's not, that's kind of not what we're doing here.
It's not what a lot of us are as well when it comes to computers. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I do want people to be able to use computers as easily and as simply as possible. Right. But there's a fun factor there that I think people miss out on when they're not willing to experiment. And honestly, I think that, I came from a Unix background as well. I was working in Unix professionally, but I think one of the things that attracted me so much to Linux is and this is at the time when Windows was being packaged up, and frankly, it was illegal. You couldn't actually go in under the surface and try to muck about with it and do things. Whereas Linux basically opened the door and said, do whatever you want, play with this in any way that you want. And then you had thousands, tens of thousands of programmers all around the world that took that up as a call and said, hell yeah, let's start experimenting. Let's start building things. And those are the people that built the internet. Those are the people that built your Android phones. Those are the people that make it possible for you to surf the World Wide Web or send an email or something like that. You know this because, I tell you this, you hear me say this on a regular basis, but Linux, as strange as it might seem to some people, is the single most popular operating system in the world. Most people don't see it because they're used to seeing what's on their desktop. But you've got Linux running on Chromebooks. You've got Linux running on every Android phone that's out there, like my Pixel here. It's called Android, but it's still a Linux kernel that's running under the surface. As I pointed out, Google, if you do a Google search, you're using Linux. If you send an email, you're using Linux. If you connect to any website on the internet, you're using Linux because you're using something called DNS, which runs on Linux servers that make it possible for you to connect to all this stuff. So Linux and open source basically runs the world. Or to steal a little bit from the tagline of your show, computers run the world and we run computers. Right. Well, you know what? Linux runs the world of computers.
But hey, and before we get into more of this philosophical philosophizing, whatever you call it, I actually want to bring us a little bit back down to earth and talk about Cooking with Linux, the website, because I remember the soothing beiges. I felt like whenever I visited Cooking with Linux, it was like drinking coffee. It was beiges and browns and soothing, and now we have something a little more techy, a little more masculine.
Well, here's what happened, and this is actually going to slide in well with the video that I've got at the beginning there.
Sure.
Or the video that I listed in our show notes here when people are looking at the show notes. A couple of weeks ago, I guess it was now, there was something there was what was called Drupalgeddon 2, because if it snows a lot, they call it Snowmageddon.
Right.
And there's always a Mageddon somewhere in there. So about a year or two ago, there was a big Drupal content management system bug, which was a real security bug called, and they called it Drupalgeddon. Well, they couldn't call it Drupalgeddon again, so they called it Drupalgeddon 2. Original, really original. And I had converted a bunch of websites to the latest version of Drupal, and what had happened is that the latest version of Drupal doesn't use the same update or upgrade methods as previous versions. Okay, previous versions actually had a fairly easy way and a single source in which to do updates, and it was actually pretty simple and pretty easy. And then with Drupal 8, they started distributing it, with tarballs or zip files, if you like. And but you could also install it via Git. You could install it from multiple repositories. You could install it using Composer and Symfony and things like this. And it started sort of breaking all over the place. And one of the places that it broke was on my Cooking with Linux site. And after about, I must have spent like 6-8 hours trying to fix all the problems that, with this particular upgrade.
Right.
And at some point I thought, this is just nuts. This is bugging the heck out of me. This is nuts. And I went and did a search, and I found, and I thought, I'm just going to use something else for this because I'm upset, but I don't want to lose my content that I've got on there. So what I did was I found, I decided to try WordPress, and I have to admit, WordPress has come a long way over the years. I was actually really impressed with how far it's come and how nice some of the features of it are. But most importantly, I found a plugin, which was a Drupal to WordPress plugin. And there was a test for it. Like there was a little test which would convert like 2 articles or something like that. And the guy who wrote it, I mean, maybe I should go back and then add it into the show notes if anybody's curious. But the guy who wrote it said, listen, if you want the full version that'll convert a whole site for you, give me 39 euros. Which worked out to like about $50 or something like that. And after wasting 6-8 hours of my day and pulling out my hair and going nuts, I thought, you know what? I've tested it. It works. I'm going to give this guy my money. So I bought the plugin and I ran it against the database for my old site. And I pulled in all the content. And in a matter of like about, this is almost not an exaggeration. After about 5 minutes, I had a complete new site running on WordPress with all my old content and my images all ported forward.
That's so, and trust me, we use WordPress for Computer America as well, and like the amount of like little plugins you find, because like there are the big ones that have millions of downloads and blah blah blah, but then there are like the little ones, like trying to, like just recently we wanted to embed Twitch, and it's not working on the website yet, but we wanted to embed our the Twitch stream into computeramerica.com, and there's a plugin for that. It has like 7 reviews, but it's the same kind of maker spirit that you were talking about earlier, yes, where if you have a problem, one other person might as well, and you can make a plugin for it. It's super simple.
And that's what this guy, that's what this guy did. I mean, I don't know how many of these things he sells. I can't imagine it's like a huge, I can't imagine it's a huge business. I mean, how often is there somebody that comes along and says, I really desperately want to convert my website? I mean, typically speaking, people don't mess with success. If it's working, so I don't know what part of it, how big a business this is for him, but I'm quite thankful for the work that he did, because he basically, not only made my life a lot easier, but helped me convert the site. So I had this system, and it was running on a Linux system. My back end on this one, in case anybody's curious, is like your typical Linux LAMP stack. LAMP means Linux, Apache, MySQL, and historically Perl, but these days PHP. Okay, so a LAMP stack, and this is running on an Ubuntu box. So my whole website, everything was running on an Ubuntu server, with this back end on it. And I just, I use this site to, put my material out there and promote my material, and I didn't want to fight with this. So right now I'm actually experimenting with additional plugins on there. I've got my Patreon plug-in on the Cooking with Linux site there. And, and it just, everything just sort of dropped in very, very nicely. And I even had the opportunity to do an update, which, as you might recall, is what started this whole thing in the first place. The update that failed, the update that just wasn't happening in the midst of a security problem. Well, the next day, there was actually a security update for WordPress. I don't know if it was a security update, but it was an update. And it was as simple as click this button. Yeah. And the update just happened. And I thought, man, this is just beautiful. This is wonderful. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, WordPress is the reason it's used by so many. It's very powerful. And like, I even find myself impressed with it, because I'm not sure which theme you have. Themes are the things that kind of, change the background, change the link colors, change, just like the superficial stuff. But it's so, so quickly I tried to use different website builders, and I had to essentially go in and change every little thing, assign everything a value to, kind of get it to look differently. And with WordPress, I don't know if this is the lazy part of me or just the impressed part, but I love that I can just kind of drag a zip folder in and, have it do its thing. And it looks like a completely different website, on the front end of it. Yes. Back end, everything's still there. Front end.
Well, but that's kind of the idea of a content management system, right? Is that you worry about the content, we'll worry about making it look good.
And I love that. I love how WordPress does that. Like I'm not tied to it so far. There has been a few security things that WordPress has, kind of fallen victim to. You definitely need to stay on top of it security wise because it is the largest target. So, your website is as vulnerable as it could probably be. But at the same time, they do a lot of work on it. So,
Well, I mean, there are a lot of big content management systems out there, and I did mention Drupal, and I mean, I use Drupal partly because some of my customers that I have worked with over a number of years also use. I've got like a few customers using CiviCRM, which is actually a customer relationship management software. Which would not work on something like WordPress. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, there is actually a version of it available for WordPress these days, but you go back 2-3 years and there wasn't. It just wasn't available. You were either going to use one of the big, if you'll pardon the expression, industrial content management systems like Drupal or like Joomla, which are the two big ones if you want to be able to do basically anything. Okay, these are like industrial strength, powerful content management systems, but they also can bite you real bad if you have problems because they are these big monoliths. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm gonna, and you can point. I mean, I did a video on this just this past Tuesday. Sure. I did what I called a CMS smorgasbord. And I do this like every Tuesday. I do what I call Cooking with Linux Without a Net. I do this live on YouTube, and if people want to go to cookingwithlinux.com or they want to go to my YouTube channel, and I mean we'll talk about the links. The links will be in the show notes or at the end. But what I did was I decided that I would install live 4 different content management systems, like basically on the fly. And I did Drupal, I did Joomla, I did WordPress, and I did a new one I'd never heard of before called Backdrop. And I'm going to mention Backdrop because I'm really impressed. The developers, the 2 main developers are actually, old Drupal developers or old Drupalers, if you will. And they decided that maybe things were getting a little too big and too scary, and they wanted to go back to be able to create a content management system for people, that was simpler, like WordPress, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
And so they started as a base, as near as I can tell. They started as a base from the old Drupal code, and they created this new content management system. And if you're curious, it's backdropcms.org, backdropcms.org. And I installed that one as well. And that one has in it some of the things that you find. And in fact, they've made a couple of changes since I did the show. I mean, that's how responsive they were to it. So I'm fairly impressed. And like WordPress, you can say, hey, let's have a look at some of the themes that are out there. And it's got a whole list of themes that you can install with a single click. So at the moment, if you were, somebody who wanted to set up a work site, right? A website with a CMS, content management system, and a blog in the background or something like that, I would not hesitate to recommend Backdrop, as just as I wouldn't hesitate to recommend WordPress for somebody that wanted to check either of those things out. So if you're curious to see how it goes and how it happens, people can check out the video that I created on Tuesday. And like I said, I walked through all 4 of them, so you can find out what they look like and how they work. And I think in each case, I set it up with a simple post with an image inserted to see just how easy it was to insert content into an image. Right. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and I will say that I was just kind of thumbing through your articles here. You've been pumping out the content over the past 2 or so weeks. It's really flowing lately, and I definitely see that.
I've been frustrated. Like I said, I've been frustrated with the Drupal site that I had there before, and to be perfectly honest, the Drupal Geddon 2 issue was just the straw. Oh. I mean, I've been bugged by it for a while because this is not meant. My Cooking with Linux site isn't meant to be a big e-commerce site or anything like that. It's just my blog,
right?
So I didn't want to get bogged down with issues, and I was continually bogged down with issues, and it's like I'm just done with this. So I have no problems with the idea that I've gone to WordPress on that one. On my marcelgagne.com site, which is everything including religion and politics. As opposed to just Linux.
Right.
I am sorely tempted to see what I can do about moving it over to Backdrop, just so that I can, run them both side by side and see what I think going forward.
There you go. And I will. I'm sorry. And I will say that that. What will I say? I don't even know what I'll say. But it's. I mean, honestly, just kind of flipping through these. I personally really do like WordPress, and I'm glad that you are kind of giving it a chance. I mean, there's a lot that you could do. There's a lot of ways that you could take cookingwithlinux.com, and I don't know. It's I kind of felt the same way. It wasn't something. ComputerAmerica.com was just a way for us to host our content where people can find it in one place. We honestly, because hey, we're live radio, we do a live video feed, we do podcasts. A lot of our stuff is pointing outwards, but sometimes you just want something simple that people can go to and chase everything down going out. So yeah, same kind of instance here with Computer America, I will say.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, just make it work.
So you have the website overhaul. Let's talk about some of these other news, rumors, conspiracy theories. And I didn't know Linux had so many. But
there are always a whole pile of them. I didn't want to spend I mean, I could have put like a dozen or 2 dozen here, but
let's just touch on some of these.
Yeah. One of them that I'm going to jump to number 3 in the list. Okay.
Sure.
You remember back a long time ago when Microsoft said that Linux was a cancer that had to be eradicated?
I don't think Linux community would ever let anyone forget. Right. They hold it as a badge of honor.
Like 3 years, maybe 3 years ago or something, Microsoft started this thing called Microsoft Loves Linux. And if you go on their website, they actually have a section where it's, Microsoft with a big heart in the center, Linux. Microsoft loves Linux. And they started basically, embracing open source in a number of different ways. And in fact, in Windows 10, the old cmd.exe, the old command shell, is gone. And it's now a Linux shell. So it's actually the Bourne shell, the Linux Bourne shell, which is how you work with Windows, on the back end, if you will. On the back end, as in the command line.
I had to use that so much, like over the past 2 days or so. Luckily, it hasn't affected the show, but over the past 2 days, I had to do so much network troubleshooting. I found myself using that and a lot better because you don't have to restart every time you change a setting. You don't have to, kind of worry about is it applied. It just kind of happens. I'm glad that they made the change. It's worked out well.
Well, so now that was interesting in and of itself because all of a sudden on the back end on Windows, you're actually running Linux. So that's kind of like, whoa. But the big whoa this week, or was it last week? Well, the last few days anyway, was that Microsoft announced that for the first time in the 43 years that they've existed as a business, they're releasing their own version of Linux. So,
which is weird because a lot of people think Microsoft and they think, hey, they make their money selling their distribution. They make money selling, their distribution. They make money selling Windows. And for them to, send out a quote unquote rival and I assume free maybe. Yeah, strange.
Well, it's not that strange because, as I mentioned, my computers run the world. Well, Linux does run the world, especially the networked world, the internet, and Microsoft. A lot of Microsoft's business, as with a lot of Google's business, for instance, is actually web services. It's no longer the desktop. I mean, we still think of most people who are using a computer at home. Unless they're using a Mac or a Chromebook, still tend to think of the computer as this graphical desktop. This is the thing that they work in. Mm-hmm. So they're not focused on what's running under the surface. This isn't a big thing anymore. What people are working on tends to be in the cloud these days. And that includes things like your documents and spreadsheets and things like that. And in fact, Microsoft's flagship product on top of Windows, although for so many years, was Microsoft Office, right?
Right.
that was honestly, that was the big money maker, was Microsoft Office. But now Microsoft Office is not something you put on your computer. For most people, it's Office 365, which is a cloud-based office suite.
Right.
All right, that you pay with, that you sorry, not pay with, that you pay for on a subscription basis. So it's now a subscription service that's available to anybody, and it doesn't matter what you run. I mean, you could be running Windows, you could be running Linux, you could be running Mac OS. In fact, there's Office 365, available for your Android devices as well. So you can access all these services over the internet. So the idea of the desktop is, I don't know that it's no longer relevant. I'm not sure that I'm ready to say that, because there are people who need a powerful desktop operating system. They need to be able to do things on their desktops. But for so many people, it's the web. It's what's happening out there.
We kind of had this conversation yesterday with Darius Derekshani, and I don't exactly recall how our graphics correspondent got into the philosophy of quantum computers, but hey, it happened. And it's this idea that quantum computers, they work better when they are centralized. Having a little quantum computer at home is never going to compete with a massive quantum computer run by Intel, IBM, whatever. So, and essentially what you're getting at is that eventually we can all see a future where we have terminals to a mainframe, where you are simply accessing a computer elsewhere, and that's all you're doing.
Yes, this is where we get into the world of magic. No, and I say that jokingly. My son, I have a 10-year-old. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my 10-year-old has never known a world where things aren't available at his fingertips. Right. And these days, if he wants to remember something, like if he wants to remember that he's got a birthday party to go to on the weekend, he'll actually talk to the Google Home speaker. He's got one in his bedroom as well, which he bought with his own money, by the way. I just want to point out.
He's 10 years old,
and he'll talk to it, and he'll say, "Remind me on Saturday morning that I've got to go to Aiden's birthday party or whatever." And
that's awesome.
And to him, it's just the way things are. He is used to the idea that he doesn't have to pick up the phone. He just talks to his tablet, and he can chat with his friends while he's playing a video game. It doesn't matter where people are for him. They could be anywhere in the world, so long as they're on screen with him at any given time. He asks for things, they happen. He wants to know what the weather is. It's done for him. Like, he's living in this world of magic. He almost doesn't. Let's not say he almost actually he's getting into the geek world as he's starting to code a little bit and create his own things and so forth. But so he is actually interested in what's happening under the surface. But things have been magic for him since he was born, basically. Well, and more so all the time.
Yeah, I mean, if not magic, then things are kind of usable. Like they're intuitive. Where I think earlier, and this is something that computers and digital assistants and all that have to really do a better job at, and they're getting better. I've said this since Alexa and Google Home first came out. I shouldn't say their names; they might be listening. But I should say this since they came out, is that one of the best things that Google and Amazon do is that they get machines to talk to humans. Like humans don't have to learn how to talk to them. The machines are learning how to talk to humans. That's the best thing. And it's great that your son is able to kind of pick that up and run with it, because, hey, those are good skills that probably won't decay as time goes on. It's only going.
They're not going to decay, but as time goes on, the idea is to one of the big markers of the success of Linux is that Linux has become invisible. Okay, we used to. We joked about this for years. It was 1999 is going to be the year of the Linux desktop. 2000 year of the Linux desktop. 2001 year of the Linux desktop. Right. And on and on and on, and every year and so forth. And then somewhere along the way, we went from Linux being this operating system that a few geeks were using in a lab or on their desktops because they were geeks, frankly. And and by the way, I'm proud to be one of those people. But somewhere along the way, it became invisible. Okay, it's in your thermostat, it's in your television, it's the operating system that runs your car if you've got a car with a smart system that's built in. It's in your smartwatch if you've got a smartwatch. It is, like I said, it's the basis that runs the entire internet. It's invisible. Okay, so most people, when they think of their computers, if they've got a Mac, they think, oh, Mac. They're from the Apple world, so they think Macs, or they think Windows if they've got a desktop. But Linux is literally everywhere. Like, it is everywhere, including under the surface for a lot of these other things.
So,
and that's because it's now invisible. And technology like Google Home or Alexa or whatever is becoming invisible. And that's what the whole point behind cloud-based services are. It's like the service is available to everybody all the time. Okay?
right.
And we're still living in a culture where being a maker or a hacker is not only still doable, but has more doors and more opportunities for doing cool stuff than, frankly, ever before.
Yeah.
Because we have such cool technology to work with that we never had before, which doesn't change the fact that for most people, that stuff is getting further and further and further under the surface and more invisible as time goes on. Because when you think about it, when you talk to your speaker and you ask it to play music, there's something incredible happening under there. If you are having a discussion with this thing, about not just the weather, but the idea that it remembers that you were talking about the weather 2 sentences ago. So if you just say, well, what about tomorrow, as the question, and it remembers that you were talking about the weather, that's amazing.
To go from auditory human to some kind of computer speak to actually referencing proper material, it certainly is amazing. And to your point that it's getting more and more so, we've even seen instances where AI or machine learning is able to actually program programs. You kind of say what you want to happen and it will program stuff. But hey, yeah, exactly. But we're getting a little far. Let's actually go back and hit the final point on this article from Microsoft and the whole Azure Cloud and Linux thing. What is Microsoft's end game with releasing this? Who are they targeting?
In this case, it's a custom Linux distribution to power their Azure Cloud. Okay. And that's their software on demand, also hardware on demand, service, software as a service. It's basically to power their particular backend. So Linux has been doing it for quite a while. What makes this interesting is that they've, like Google, to be perfectly honest, they've decided to spin their own version of it to work for themselves. But because, of course, it is a Linux distribution, any changes that they make has to be rolled back into the community. So Microsoft is now not just a company that uses open source, but they're also a company that now contributes to the Linux kernel development. So it's fascinating.
It is. So, all right. So Microsoft, but they, like I said way at the beginning, for the past couple of years, they actually like Linux. They love Linux. So, with that being said, did you want to skip over to the topic of the day? Because honestly,
I think this is your fault. You always let me go off on a tangent.
but hey, that's the fun part. Hey, folks, if there let's just put it this way: there's bonus content in the show notes. If you want to check that out, Marcel has it, right there for you. Bonus content right there available. Lucky you. Topic of the day, please take it away.
Oh, what is the topic of the day? Where do you want to go? Talk to me.
Let's see.
Go to distribution focus.
Yeah, let's go, because I think we already hit, Dremel.
We did this. We did the CMS thing, and I do invite anybody who's interested in content management systems or doing a website to actually check out that video. Not just because I put it together, but because it's a good comparison, and it's a real time comparison of how you go about setting these things up if you actually wanted to.
Right. So let's go ahead and go to distribution focus. And you actually vented just a little bit before the show. This isn't your favorite one by far.
You
can't say it's your favorite. I mean, come on.
You're spreading on thin ice here.
Go ahead.
I guess this was about 3 weeks ago or something like that. There was something, and I don't even remember what it was, which is this is awful. This is awful. But I had been running Kubuntu again. As you know, I switch distributions like other people change their underwear. Well, maybe not that often, but But I had been running Kubuntu again for a while, and I ran into some things that just annoyed the heck out of me. And I remember now. It had to do with the NVIDIA support, and of course, as you know, I do streaming using open broadcasting software, which you and I are, both familiar with. I'm sure a lot of people out there are familiar with OBS, so open broadcasting software, and suddenly it just wasn't working anymore. And it was like, no, I need this to work. This is one of those things that I have to have working. And the NVIDIA driver that came in this particular update of Kubuntu/Ubuntu, because really under the surface it's the same thing, basically blacked out my screen. And again, it was one of those things that I was fighting with it. And although I could probably at some point have figured out a way to fix it, there's this part of you that goes, I'm just done here.
Same thing with the website. You spend 8 hours, and then someone else, you're like, 5 minutes. This guy's got it.
Yeah, so I was in a mood. Okay, I was in a mood, and of course, because I'm one of those guys who does switch distributions on a regular basis, my immediate thought was, I don't want to fight with this. I'm just going to do something else. So I decided that I hadn't checked out. There was a few distributions I hadn't checked out for a while, so I decided to check out OpenSUSE, and it's really pretty, but it was not what I was looking for what I wanted. And I had a couple of friends who actually work over at Red Hat. All right, and you know who you guys are, who said, "Oh, well, you have to run Fedora, of course." So I looked at it and I thought, I don't know. And I tried a couple of other ones, and in the end, there were things that I didn't like about the other ones, and I don't remember what exactly, but I tried about 4 different distributions in a day, and I thought I wanted to do something I hadn't actually run in a little while. So that was kind of my decision. Get something you haven't run in a while. So I went for Fedora finally. I decided, okay, cool, Fedora, and I ran Fedora 27, which didn't, as it turns out, everything was working fine, or so it seemed. And then there were a couple of things that didn't work, and it was like, well, this is bloody frustrating. So, okay, well, the beta of Fedora 28. So I upgraded to the beta of Fedora 28 because it was in beta at the time. And then I found out that there were a bunch of packages. Now, what you have to understand is that different distributions have different philosophical bents, if you will, when it comes to open source. And some of them are perfectly okay with including what's called non-free software with it. Case in point, Linux Mint. Linux Mint will have support for things like codecs that are not open source codecs, for instance, or video codecs, so you can play different video formats that are not technically open source. And they'll make it easy for you to install a driver that's not open source. And then there are other distributions that say, no, we are going to be as pure as humanly possible. And in fact, if you want to install something that isn't free software, and I'm talking free as in speech as opposed to free as in beer, because, free is, you understand the whole free as in speech, free as in beer thing, right?
Yeah. Free. People assume free software means I pay $0 for it, but you mean free as in it's the source code is open, people can edit it, people can change it, as long as they kind of give credit. So
that is absolutely correct. And as long as if you make changes, you reintroduce them back into the share and share alike thing. So anyway, so Fedora is one of those distributions that's actually, fairly, likes the idea of being fairly pure. In other words, open source. And I thought, that's fine. I'm going to run Fedora because, I've run it in the past. I mean, I ran it quite a while ago, and I thought, I'll just go ahead and do this. And then I found out that no, in fact, there were a bunch of things. And of course, by this point, I've already installed it and I've already set it up. So it's like, I'm just going to bloody well make this work. So I start fighting with it to install those non-free things, because in some cases, those non-free things I actually do need to be able to work. And one of them was I needed my open broadcasting software. I wanted that back, but I needed FFmpeg, which allows you to manipulate audio and video on the back end of OBS. And that wasn't available. So it required me to load up different repositories that are non-free repositories to make all that stuff work. And little by little, things were actually working. And it was like, okay, good, I've got this. This is great. A couple of days go by. I'm kind of happy with most things. And then I realized that, yes, there are actually a couple of other things that I use on a regular basis that aren't there at all. Like I can't make them work at all.
Mm.
And in the Linux world, there are packages now that are meant to be cross-platform and cross-distribution packages. There are several big ones, but Snaps is one of them. Snaps are packages where all the dependencies and everything that comes with a package are included. So in theory, you could take a Snap and put it on any version of Linux, and it would just work.
Makes
In
sense.
theory.
Yeah.
In theory, except that the engine that needs to run those snaps has to be available and well supported. And lo and behold, it wasn't well supported under Fedora, which again started to make my frustration levels go back up. So at this point, however, I've gone past the stage where I'm just done with this. Okay, I'm past the stage, and I'm at the stage where I'm going to make this work if it kills me.
I mean, it almost sounds like that idea that we talked about a little while ago called containers.
Well, no, that's precisely what snaps are. In some ways, I mean, people don't like to call them containers, but it's exactly the same idea.
Okay.
Like Docker, everything runs in this little tiny protected environment where everything is just it's compartmentalized. The other one that I found, however, which runs on a lot of different distributions and ran beautifully on Fedora, as it turns out, is called Flatpak. And in fact, if I'm not wrong, yes, there it is, flathub.org. If you go to flathub.org, you will find that there are all sorts of different applications that have been packaged for installing on lots of different distributions. And as it turns out, one of them was Skype. Another one was Kdenlive, which is the video editor that I like to use under Linux. Was not available under Fedora easily, but there it was under that. And there were like a handful of other ones that I hadn't even really thought of ahead of time, like Steam, the Steam engine, for instance. Yes, for playing games, right?
Yeah.
So that wasn't immediately available, but there it was as a Flatpak package. So I learned about Flatpaks, and it's really cool. I mean, it's one of those things that if you're running a Linux distribution and you're thinking, well, maybe this distribution doesn't run this particular thing or doesn't have this particular thing available, there are snaps, but snaps seem to have a canonical / Ubuntu bent, if you'll pardon the expression, as in that's where they work best. Okay. Whereas Flatpak, I could be wrong. I mean, I haven't delved into it in such detail that I can say this, with 100% confidence, but it does seem to run better over a wider variety of operating systems. And right now, I'm pretty impressed with Flatpaks.
Yeah, looking through it, they have a bunch of different applications. So.
Yeah, and I think the link that I gave is directly to the apps page, and yeah, there are all these different things. They've got the editor's choice apps there, but Slack was another one. I loaded Slack that way. I loaded Steam that way. I loaded Kdenlive that way.
Audacity,
cool.
Nice one.
It is a really cool way to install packages, and there are no issues with whether you're running it on the right distribution or at the right level of that distribution, because like I said, they're self-contained. Everything that you need is there.
But that does kind of lead to the idea that, I know that you said that this makes it easy when certain distributions don't have, certain programs, but is this a proper solution, or do you think this is something that the distribution that you're using should go back to the drawing board? Should go back to the drawing board and fix, or maybe you take this as a sign that this distribution isn't for you?
No, I think that if you consider, let me take it away from Linux for a second here.
Sure.
Just to play devil's advocate as much as possible. If you think about Windows, not everything, you have to have the right version of Windows to run a particular version of software. So you have to make sure that that's the case. And if you're running a Mac, same thing. You can't run the Mac software on the Windows software and things like that. So in the Linux world, you not only have different distributions, just frankly, like in the Windows world, it's the same thing in the Windows world. I mean, you've still got people out there. I guarantee you there are still people out there who are running Windows 95. But Windows 95, Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 8.1, Windows 10. So there are all these different Windows and different distributions and different times and so on. So even there, you have that issue. What I like about the idea behind Snaps and the idea behind Flatpak, aside from the security side of it, this idea that you can run something compartmentalized where what happens with it doesn't necessarily affect what happens everywhere else on the system. Aside from that, even if you push that aside, you are basically walking into a world that doesn't need to make sure that it works on absolutely everything. I know that this was this is one of those things that we could make Craig scream in pain every time we use the word Java.
Yeah, he was a fan. He was a fan.
Yeah. But the idea there, write once, run anywhere, if only it were true, I think I'm not saying that it's 100% true here, but the idea that you can package up, an application without having to worry about whether the full support for it is available on the distribution or the operating system that you're running, I think can only be a good thing. I sending it back to the drawing board, as you say, you better make sure that it works perfectly. Well, I'm not sure that I would want to do that anyway, because if, to give Fedora, or for that matter, any distribution that has a particular philosophical bent when it comes to the way that they want their software presented and quite possibly used, I have to respect that. Okay. And just as they respect the fact that I have a choice to go elsewhere if I want to. But for those cases when I'm aligned with what they want, or not what they want, but aligned with what they provide, and to be perfectly honest, the software is great otherwise. There's nothing wrong with it otherwise. Yes, right. I didn't get this particular piece of this particular package and it irks me, but that's not necessarily their fault. But if there's a way to get around it, not so much get around it, but if there's a way to do what I want and still allow them to, to create the software and the package that they want, then, like I said, it's for everybody.
Yeah, I think where I'm coming from, obviously, is a Windows background, and I think that it's a one-size-fits-all solution. It's Windows 10 or, get out of the way. And if it doesn't work with Windows 10, then they did something wrong. And I can see where you're trying to get to the point where, it's not Fedora's fault. It's not Red Hat's fault. It's just a part of using all these different pieces. And hey, there is a solution. It's no one's fault, but there's an easy enough way to fix it, or there's an easy enough way to get around it. So I guess that's where I come from, where if it doesn't work, then Microsoft messed up, or whoever produced the program messed up. And I guess that's a very one operating system kind of thinking.
You talked about quantum computers. Mm-hmm. You had the guy on yesterday. I think you said it was yesterday. and he was talking about quantum computing being centralized and so forth. Oh, by the way, I should point out that the Institute for Quantum Computing, one of the two leading centers in the entire world, is just down the street from me here in Waterloo. Neat. Okay, yeah. At the University of Waterloo, the Institute for Quantum Computing. So, woohoo, Waterloo.
Very cool. Nice shout out.
I just had to throw that out there. Anyway, but let's go back in time a little bit here, okay?
Not too much, and just real quick, not too far back in time, because we only have about 5 minutes left. So not too far back in time.
Well, once upon a time, back in time, we had things where basically we had a mainframe and you had terminals, like dumb screen terminals connected to a mainframe. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, somebody said, this is really stupid. We should move the computing power onto the desktop to be able to handle graphics and things like that. And that was really, really cool and a great idea. And then somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, let's move all these services and things like that back into the cloud. And in a strange sort of way, we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
Okay. Whether it's the centralized quantum computing services, or Google's AI that serves up the assistant, or Alexa, or whatever. yeah, now we've got these little desktop computers that let us do funky graphical things and so forth. But we're sort of going back to the future where the services, the big computing power, the magic is actually happening back in, if you'll pardon the expression, the mainframe, except that nowadays we call it the cloud or the cluster in the cloud or whatever you want to call it. I think the only big constant in computers is, and in this kind of technology is that things are always changing, and maybe someday we'll have like an AI in our pocket, whereas right now, excuse me, sorry for the burp there. Whereas right now the AI is actually in the cloud. I mean, so when I talk to my Google Home here, it's not happening in the Google Home. It's actually going out to the internet, talking to the big bad AI in the Google Cloud, and then coming back and telling me the answer to what the weather is.
Yeah, it's kind of like that movie. I think it was called Her or something like that, and like she was talking to thousands of other people where that dude thought it was just him and her.
That was an awesome movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I love the idea. It was kind of like a Black Mirror movie or an episode.
No. It's not dark like Black Mirror. Okay, you need to watch Her. You need to watch Her next time we meet. Next time we meet, I want you to have watched Her. Okay.
All right. Yeah, as long as I can find her. So with with that being said, again, we have like 3 minutes here. Real quick, talk about your latest distribution with Deepin.
Oh, you know what? We'll leave it for later because I just won't have time about that. But we can't delve into that in enough time. But what I do want to point out is that if you're okay with me promoting that aspect of things, is the Tuesday Linux show at 12 noon.
Tell us about that.
If you want to see me, if you want to see me fall flat on my face and actually do something live on my computer, by all means. Just come, and I guarantee you I will make mistakes and look stupid for you. So you'll get to see, a Linux geek who supposedly knows a lot of this stuff going, oh my God, what went wrong?
Tell me the reasoning behind doing it live versus what you traditionally did, which was do the work behind the scenes, film yourself, cut out the 7 hours of you banging your head against the wall, and you put up a 12-minute video. Like, why do it live instead of, a little bit more succinct?
I think it's kind of fun, and the feedback that I've had from it is that people seem to enjoy watching the process. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it shows that this is a human endeavor, and I think in some ways it takes away the mystique behind it. Like people go, "Oh, well, obviously you're like this big time expert, so it's easy for you, And I think what I wanted to show was, yeah, it's easy, but I go through a process of trying to figure this out just like everybody else does. Okay. So I'm not trying to take away the mystique or the magic behind it. I'm trying to show that, this is something we can all do. This is something we can all play with. This is something that we can all learn to do. And I think that makes it interesting. Right. I may change my mind at some point and go back to the point where I make it all look like magic and I never fail and I never make any mistakes. But right now it's kind of cool. It's like people painting on Twitch, right?
Yeah, no. From what I've seen, and especially on Twitch, you have, of course, people who like to watch, all the ins and outs of what they do, but then they also can go back and take the video and cut it back down for people who only have, 10 minutes. They don't want to sit through, the long version. But hey, it's like, honestly, that's why we're taking Computer America in that direction as well, where, hey, people are, like people want to interact with you because doing it live, I'm sure that you can also talk with people. If they have questions, you can actually interact with them as well and kind of explain, what I did here, why I do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And sometimes it's fun to, pull back the curtain and see what people are doing behind the curtain.
Right. And by the way, I heard this somewhere that the only difference between a novice and an expert computer user is simply who can Google better and what can you do with the information you get from Google. So I believe that to be true. So with that being,
Go ahead. I was just going to say there's a quote to Albert Einstein that's attributed to Albert Einstein. It goes something like this, I don't have to know everything. I just have to know where to look it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that being said, the music means that we're just about done here. And Marcel, I want to say thank you so much. This hour flew on by. I am happy that we actually got you on Skype if you're listening. And for everyone else out there who is watching Computer America, thank you so much. And be sure to check out computeramerica.com because, again, they have the show notes, which have everything we talked about, including links to Marcel, his live video, his website, everything. You can find that there. So with that being said, we are just going to wrap it up here. And Marcel, looking forward to next month. And yeah, good luck with the website, the videos, the everything.
All right, you take care out there, my friend.
All right, have a great one. And everyone else out there listening, thank you for tuning in to Computer America. Be sure to check us out Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. As let's see if we can do this real quick. Tomorrow on the program, we have a company called Quit. But it's not spelled like quit. It's quit. So everyone, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.